might want to think about it. It's a bit like the weather, you know. I mean, if you don't check the weather and you just assume it's sunny, um, and you go out and you know it's raining, uh, you know, you get wet. Or sometimes where you know where we live, it's colder than, say, for example, in Ross on Wye. So you know we leave here dressed in a certain way, and we arrive in Ross on Wye, it's completely different. Everyone's in shorts and sandals, and you feel like. And so, unless, in a way, unless you know who's sitting down, or unless you know who's coming to your practice, whether it's the practice of TMW or the practice of meditation, you know, or anything at all, unless you know who's showing up, you don't really know quite how to navigate that. You know, I mean, you know, a sailor would study the kind of wind maps to um, you know, to know the conditions and how to work with the conditions. Someone who's going on a walk would also study the kind of weather map, and in order to, you know, have all the right um, you know, gear to handle the situation, and then some. You know, that anyone who's done any serious walking will know that you not only have to take what you think you might, you know, meet, you also have to take, you know, equipment for potential emergencies, so that you're kind of ready. And you know, and people kind of show up for a long walk in the mountains in flip flops are gonna definitely gonna have a problem. And in a way, it's a bit like that when we come to our practice. Some of us like that. We kind of show up, you know, for a mountain walk in flip flops, and then we wonder why, you know, why it doesn't work so well. So I just want to talk very briefly before we, you know, go into the meditation, just to point you in the direction of two things, two kind of roots. And you know, and the first root is, you know, what is your intention? Do you have an intention? So when you come to your practice, you know, do you have an intention? And the example I have in my mind is that a few years ago, I was traveling to America to do some studying, and where I was staying was on a kind of beachfront, in a hotel in Virginia Beach. Really nice, facing the sunrise. And every morning I'd go down onto the beach and start the morning, you know, as the sun was coming up, I'd be doing my TMW to get me ready for, you know, my working day, as it were. And I just started to, because the environment was so amazing, I started to notice when, you know, when my practice wasn't amazing, because here I was in this amazing place. And sometimes, you know, I'd finish the end of the sequence and I'd just be going, well, might as well have stayed in bed. And you know, nothing touched me, as it were. And what I started to understand was I had assumed that the environment being beautiful was going to take care of me, and that I didn't really have to do anything. In fact, I wasn't really there. I hadn't tested my weather, as it were. And so, even though I know, you know, I'm the one who knows. I mean, in terms of the movements, been doing them for decades. There's not a lot that I don't know about those movements. And I can do them really well. I mean, I'm an expert. You know, it's like I can't I can't say to myself, "Well, you don't know," you know, because I really do know. And so, but even with all that experience, you know, all that knowledge, and this fabulous location, you know, there I was, just feeling like, well, so what? Why wasn't I touched? And I wasn't touched for two reasons. One, I didn't really have the intention, other than to get out of bed and get down there, the intention to be touched. And I wasn't using my knowing. I wasn't using the knowing of what I'm doing. So if I were to think about the meditation practice, the intention, what is your intent when you sit down? Are you sitting down just simply to center yourself? Are you sitting down to converse with yourself? Are you sitting down to quieten your mind? Are you sitting down to touch your true nature? Or do you just sit down and engage? And who sits down? So if, for example, my social self sits down, I haven't got a prayer. Because my social self wants to check the phone, wants to look at this, wants to do that, wants to have breakfast, wants to talk to people. My social self is not at all interested, in God. My social self isn't really interested in finding true nature. My social self is not interested, in quietening the mind. My social self wants the mind to be kind of like this. So if I sit down with my social self, my meditation is going nowhere. My practice is going nowhere. So there's a sense of intention. So yes, the social self might sit down. That might be, what I've just come from. But my intention is to get past that. So if I have that intention to relax through my social self, into a deeper place in myself, then that's going to be very different from just sitting there and asking my social self to, practice the principles, for example. And then there's the knowing. So the knowing of what a move is in our practice of TMW, we have these sort of 16 movements. And each of these movements, there is a flow there, there's a story there, there's an understanding there, that it's not a random sequence. And each gesture, has its meaning. Each gesture has its atmosphere. Each gesture has an invitation to it. But only if I allow myself to know that. Otherwise, if I'm not really in my body, if I really don't have that intention, if I don't exercise that knowing, and I can think of that time on that beach where, I'm basically doing that. Well, I might as well just be doing that with a cup of coffee. It's like, it's completely meaningless. And yet I know that movement, can be the most sublime movement. But if I don't at least allow that knowing, it's just a series of movements which has no meaning to it. And so in terms of our meditation practice, when I come to sit down, if I don't know or remember the principles, if I don't know or remember the sequence, the sequence of these qualities is A, to become present, embodied, or to join that embodied presence. That's the first stage. The second stage is then to allow a sense of softening. And with that presence and with that softening, there's a kind of permeability in me which allows that deeper aspect to come closer, which would be the third movement. And then to simply sit there for as long as I can stay in touch with that. And that might be like 1 second, or that might be half a minute. But there has to be, in a way, if I'm going to do like a short meditation, that's it, pretty much. and then I get up and leave. But if I stay a little longer, so if I have that 5 minutes or 10 minutes, there needs to be that understanding, that I want to return because I am going to leave. A master knows they're going to leave. The person who doesn't know thinks they're going to stay, but the master knows. It's just going to happen sooner or later. I'm going to leave myself. So then I start again. I simply come back. I realize I've left because I'm listening to my weather system, as it were. I know I've left. So then I start again. I don't just come back to where I was. See, that would also be a mistake. To try and come back straight back to true nature. And if you've ever tried to do that, you realize it's not really helpful because true nature's not there anymore. Who's there? Distraction. So then I start again. I come back into my body, feet on the ground. I remember, I allow that knowing to occur. And whenever there's that distraction, in order for there to be distraction, the way I think about it is it's a bit like, if you have a violin string and you detension the string and you try and play it, you're not going to get any sound whatsoever. In order to get sound, you have to tension the string. So it's the same with the mind. If the strings of the mind are tight, then this is what's going to happen. But if having become present, there's this, become present, and then I realize that I have to just start to sort of soften or allow or just understand that second movement. Then the strings of my mind start to soften. And then it becomes more quiet. And then in that more quietness, I start to remember, the heart of me. And then, I just think, well, why do I ever leave? And then I think, well, I leave because, I've got this to do, and then now I've got that to do, and I mustn't forget this, and I mustn't forget that. And as soon as I finish the meditation, I'm going to do this and that. And then the next thing you know, there it is. It's all forgotten. It's gone. So again, with that intention and knowing, intention to come back, and the knowing of how to do that through that very simple sequence of presence, if I just stay there just a little bit longer, something starts to soften. And then that sense of, a deeper aspect of myself starts to emerge. And the only issue is, can I just simply allow that? Can I become or allow more presence? Can I soften around that need to do this or to do that? That's that understanding of intention, the intention to stay, and the knowing of what I'm doing. And as long as I have that intention and that knowing, this cycle is a continuous process, and there is a kind of a deepening. The minute I lose track of that intention, I become untethered, then away I go. And that's not a mistake, that's fine. The master knows they're going to leave. I don't expect myself to stay. I know I'm going to leave. So I just ask myself to come back. I don't regard that as failure. If there is a failure, it would be the failure not to come back, rather than the failure of leaving. You might want to think about it that way. But failure, that word failure doesn't really work in this context. It's just simply an experience and a process and a learning. So just next time you come to your practice, whatever your practice is, just have that understanding of, you know, the intention. What is it that you are intending here? You know, I'm intending to take these 5 minutes, you know, to be touched by the path of the principles. And the knowing is that those 3 principles, those 3 qualities, you know, start with being present, start with that sense of groundedness, you know, however you want to context yourself, and that then it is going to unfold, and you just simply let that unfold. Without that knowing, very easy to not even start. I mean, you're sitting there, you know, but you haven't started because there is no intention and there's no knowing. So you might want to think about it in terms of like the weather. It's not a bad analogy. If you want to go for a walk, you need to know what the weather's doing. So whenever I travel, you know, I have a little collapsible, you know, umbrella just in case. Always be prepared. Okay.